What's up, y'all? I'm about to give you guys my fight week breakdown and prediction of Terrence "Bud" Crawford versus Showtime Shawn Porter happening on ESPN pay-per-view live this Saturday, and I think that's where it's happening. So, I'm gonna give you guys my breakdown and prediction of the fight. Talking about what's going into this fight. Both of their performances, last performances, recent activity in the weight classes, because we are gonna talk a little bit about Terrence Crawford's resume overall and Shawn Porter's resume at welterweight. I mean, we're gonna do some comparisons, but we have to keep in mind, like before we go into the video, that styles make fights, and that could be applied to both individuals. I'm not saying anybody specifically, but I'm just saying in general, of course. So let's get to it. And Terrence Crawford, he's coming into this fight off that Kell Brook performance where he stopped him at least what, like 5 rounds, if I recall, in the December last year of 2020. So he is coming off a year of a layoff essentially. So you have to keep that in mind. Shawn Porter fought Sebastian Formella. I forgot how long that was ago, maybe this year, beginning of the year. But it's been a while since we've seen Shawn Porter in the ring. We didn't see him in the summer. We didn't see him recently, like in September or anything like that. So both of these guys are coming off some long layoffs compared to like a normal fighter that's normally active and, well, supposed to be active like at least 3 to 4 times a year. So that's the typical how do you put it? The typical structure of today's boxing where everyone is fighting 2 times a year if you're a top level uh quote unquote superstar. You know what I mean? But looking at this fight, I know everybody's comparing the resumes and everyone's talking about Shawn Porter has better names at welterweight, so that equates to him beating the shit out of Terrence Crawford. And you could also say the same thing about Terrence Crawford too, but in a different principle where you're talking about his resume and how like some of those fighters that are he's fighting, I mean, are actually build-ups to prepare himself for a guy like Shawn Porter. Just like how he fought Victor Postal, he had a lot of build-up fights, you know what I mean? But those were still top-level fighters at the division at the time. So you got to respect Terrence Crawford's resume at 140 pounds, because it wasn't until Terrence Crawford left the division that's when everybody started crawling from underneath the rock and started fighting each other. So um, many people were offered, or should I say many fighters like Mikey Garcia were offered to fight Terrence Crawford, but turned them down at 140 pounds for the undisputed crown. Never mind fighting a contender before going at Terrence Crawford. Terrence Crawford will offer you. He offered some of these fighters, I mean, to fight him for undisputed, but Mikey specifically turned it down. I remember like a long time ago. So Terrence Crawford was very dominant at 140 pounds, and he's still pretty dominant in a lot of his fights today. I mean, some people will go back to the Mean Machine fight, but he was still winning on the scorecards, Terrence Crawford. I've never seen Terrence Crawford losing on the scorecards in one of his long run fights. You know what I mean? Fights that last at least, what, 8 rounds, 10 rounds, 12 rounds. And then some will argue that Terrence Crawford is a slow starter. I mean, that's just the nature of the beast. That's how he works. He needs like at least 3 rounds to make an adjustment. That's when he really starts to get going. But I'm not really going to dissect off that Kell Brook performance, because a lot of people go back to that and say that Terrence Crawford was losing that fight. But how are you going to judge a Terrence Crawford fight based off of what? 4 rounds? 5 rounds? I'm pretty sure it lasted 4 rounds at least. But to say that Terrence Crawford was losing, I have to question that. Have you ever watched a Terrence Crawford fight? Sorry about that. I had some phlegm in my throat, as disgusting as that sounds. But anyways, Terrence Crawford, man, like he's a real skilled fighter, one of the best ring IQs in the entire sport, like aside from Canelo, obviously, and Alexander Usyk. He's never really made any type of big mistakes in the ring besides against Mean Machine, you know, when he did get knocked down. I've never seen this man lose on the scorecards or actually picture himself or actually seem like he's losing the entire fight. So this man always knows how to get control of everything when he's inside that squared circle, you know. So Terrence Crawford, he's a very respectable fighter. I mean, as political as I'm sounding right now, but I'm being very serious, you know, because Terrence Crawford has earned his status as he is. But Terrence Crawford has a lot of tools, man. You know, like he's very versatile. He can fight out of both stances, you know, southpaw, orthodox, and he has a lot of great punch variety, which I always try to look for in fighters, you know. And if you have great punch variety, then you could beat a lot of fighters, you know, regardless of who they are, regardless how durable they are, regardless of how athletically gifted they are, or regardless of how even skilled and experienced they are either. You know, if you don't have that punch variety, man, you're probably not even going to succeed in the sport. I'm just saying. But Terrence Crawford does have it. He has an underrated jab. He has great athleticism too, but he doesn't rely on it as much as people think. You know, Terrence Crawford is a very versatile fighter. Like he'll change up his game plan if he needs to. You know, I think he's gonna be one of those fighters that when he gets older, his defense prowess are gonna go up, but his savviness is gonna go up just as much. Believe it or not. So we're gonna see him in a bunch of fights to where he's probably gonna be in his 40s, but still winning championships at that age. And that's what I think about Terrence Crawford. But Shawn Porter, let's talk about Shawn Porter. Has one of the best resumes in the welterweight division. You know, I mean, he lost to Kell Brook. He lost to majority of the top welterweights that we know of today. But compared to the Shawn Porter that fought Kell Brook, he's a lot better than that. Compared to when he fought Keith Thurman, he's a lot better than that as well. He doesn't. But look, Shawn Porter was boxing just as good with Errol Spence as he was with Keith Thurman. And that Keith Thurman fight holds a lot of significance to me because it happened that very same year that I graduated, believe it or not. So that was a fight of the year for me. And just the way that Shawn Porter comes out in these fights, you know, he's a fast starter. He's a little bit rough and rugged for the eye of many fans. You know, I can understand why everyone would always be complaining about a Shawn Porter fight. But at the same time, man, I mean, that's just his style. You know, he's just trying to wear down his opponent. You know, it's a war of attrition for him. And he's just going to keep on coming like for the entire 12 rounds. And that could be a problem for Terrence Crawford, believe it or not. So just to break it down already, you know, like without going too much into depth about both of these guys, because at this point, we already know who they are. But Terrence Crawford is going to be very careful in this fight. You know, he's going to be dealing with a guy that's just going to come at him the whole time. But I'm also thinking he's going to set up a lot of traps. And everyone forgets that. And everyone forgets that he could still channel into his boxing ability that he demonstrated against Victor Postal, that he demonstrated against Felix Diaz, you know. And he's actually going to reach into the toolbox again because everyone is talking about how Terrence Crawford doesn't have the legs that he used to have. And I guess I know where they're coming from, but it takes the right opponent to push him out of that element. You know what I mean? Where as soon as he has somebody right in front of him that he feels is a threat and is actually legit, that's when he actually does better, especially when it's somebody that everyone has been bashing him about fighting them on. You know, I remember vividly about the Victor Postal fight, as I've said constantly in these videos, I mean, that Victor Postal was this guy that was supposed to scare off a lot of people in the division, and then supposedly Edward Choranovsky, which I think was fucking ridiculous back then, that Terrence Crawford was supposed to be afraid of, quote unquote. But then again, he fought Victor Postal and just thoroughly dominated him, knocked him down several times in the fight. Man, that was a masterpiece of his career, in my opinion, of course. And then obviously Edward Choranovsky got knocked out by Julius Ndongo. And I mean, iced in the first round, believe it or not. So, um, Terrence Crawford has a lot of power, even still at welterweight, because he hasn't gotten a distance since fighting Victor Postol, and that was the same year that Shawn Porter fought Keith Thurman. But man, I've been talking for a while, so let me take a breath a little bit. I think Shawn Porter is going to be very, very careful about how he approaches Terrence Crawford, because I think he knows that Terrence Crawford has some type of power, and he's going to be setting him up for a lot of counters every time that he tries to go on the inside. And I still remember that Shawn Porter was a little hesitant against Danny Garcia because he wasn't smothering him as much as everyone would have liked to have thought. And to me, Terrence Crawford and Danny Garcia have around the same amount of power, in my opinion. I think Terrence Crawford has underrated power at that division because he still doesn't seem like what's it called? He still doesn't seem like he's fading away like in his other abilities either. You know, like his boxing ability, his acumen inside the ring, and just the way that he approaches fights. You know, like he's very disciplined. He's not like any of these guys that you see going out partying or anything like that. Like you gotta respect this guy's craft. You know, like he's a danger to the division, and everyone's gonna see that. You know, how I see Terrence Crawford approaching this fight, man, I think he's going to start out faster than a lot of people think he would, you know, like in the first portion of this fight in particular, compared to a lot of other ones, because everyone is expecting Terrence Crawford to start out slow. But you have to keep in mind, Terrence Crawford comes from the American school of boxing, where American boxing schools are expecting somebody to come out and make an adjustment. You know what I mean? And Terrence Crawford, I think, is going to make an adjustment against Shawn Porter. He wouldn't be that stupid enough to do the same thing that he does in every single fight, and everybody's just waiting for it. You know, he's going to do something outside the ordinary, of course. And Shawn Porter, same thing, man, same thing. He comes from that same school as well. So maybe Shawn Porter, I think Shawn Porter is going to box in at least 1 or 2 rounds, and then he's going to start putting the pressure on Terrence Crawford as soon as Terrence gains some type of momentum, you know, in terms of his confidence and how he's setting up Shawn Porter for all these traps that he's going to have for him, lead uppercuts, those straights that he always throws, those looping shots. And everyone is saying knockout in this fight from either guy because everyone is questioning Terrence Crawford's punch resistance, but also there's some believers in Terrence Crawford that he might actually knock out Shawn Porter and be the guy that puts him down. So it's real hard for me to picture a knockout in this fight. I'm not gonna lie, because I've never seen Shawn Porter knocked out at all in any of his fights. I've seen him knocked down, you know, brutally against Errol Spence. I still remember that one, and I thought he was gonna get taken out of there after that one. But Shawn Porter has a lot of resolve in him, you know. He's willing to go out on a shield and just basically, you know, like just put it out all out there, you know what I mean? So Shawn Porter, he has a good jab as well. Let's keep that in mind. Every time that he was boxing Errol Spence, he was giving Errol Spence a lot of problems, but that would not be a wise choice against Terrence Crawford because Terrence Crawford has a 74-inch arm reach. Terrence Crawford can move on the outside. He can move versus oh my God, why am I stuttering so much on this word? Versatility. He has so much versatility. Let's just put it like that, you know. But Terrence Crawford, man, like he moves very smoothly. You know, he's a very fluid fighter compared to a lot of fighters out there, even more fluid than a guy like Canelo. As much as I think Canelo is a very, very smart fighter, very talented fighter, but I think Terrence Crawford takes that cake, you know, if we're putting the eye test to the ground, you know what I mean? And I think Terrence Crawford understands that there are certain mistakes that you can't make against a guy like Shawn Porter, and we're actually going to see that this coming Saturday. So I'm picking Terrence Crawford at least by unanimous decision, you know, 8-4, 9-3. There might be a knockdown. I'm actually going to think that Terrence Crawford is going to knock him down in the first portion of the fight. So I'm kind of leaning towards Terrence Crawford with a knockdown, and that just solidifies his unanimous decision. And there's not going to be a debate about it. I don't think it's going to be that close as a Kell Brook fight was, Errol Spence fight was, a Keith Thurman fight was. It's not going to be that close, in my opinion. So appreciate it, y'all. I can't wait for this fight this coming Saturday. A lot of people believe that this is going to be Terrence Crawford's first step up, like ever. You know, this is going to be like one of his first marquee names. And some will argue like Gamboa was a marquee name and during that time. And well, I mean, all I gotta say is the debates are gonna be over by Saturday because both guys are gonna have each other on their resume. You know what I mean? Shawn Porter, obviously, we already know who he is, but Terence Crawford, this is gonna be one of those fights that Terence Crawford is gonna have to meet up to expectations. You know what I mean? He has a lot going on this fight. You know, like where he goes from here, who he's gonna fight afterwards. And Shawn Porter, it's very important to him, you know, because this could be his last time fighting at the top level, you know what I mean, at welterweight. And we don't know if he's going to retire or if he's going to move up in weight, you know, continue fighting as a fighter, you know what I mean? So appreciate it, y'all. Picking Terence Crawford by unanimous decision. And we're going to find out this coming Saturday, but appreciate it and take care.